Silas Vance raised his glass, the crystal catching the light of the chandeliers, looking every bit the king of the world. 2 hours ago, a judge had banged a gavel and handed him everything. The company, the estate, and the fortune his wife's family had built for generations. He looked across the ballroom at his wife, Lydia, who stood alone in a faded gray dress, clutching her purse as if it contained the ashes of her life. He thought he had buried her. He thought the game was over. He didn't know that the man walking through the double doors behind him wasn't just an uninvited guest. He was a ghost, carrying a secret that would turn Silas's victory into a prison sentence. The celebration was about to end, and the real trial was just beginning. The champagne tasted like victory. To Silas Vance, it tasted better than that. It tasted like absolute, crushing dominance. The reception was held in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, a venue Silas had booked 3 months ago, long before the verdict was even read. That was the kind of confidence Silas operated with. He knew the law, he knew the judge, and most importantly, he knew his wife. Lydia Holloway was soft. She was raised on poetry and piano lessons, shielded from the cutthroat realities of the shipping empire her father, Arthur Holloway, had built from the ground up. When Arthur had suffered his massive stroke 2 years ago, leaving him nonverbal and confined to a high-end care facility in Zurich, Silas had made his move. It had been surgical. A slow siphoning of assets, a restructuring of the board, and finally, a divorce filing that cited Lydia's mental incompetence and inability to manage the Holloway estate. Today, Judge Harrison, a man Silas had played golf with every Sunday for 5 years, had made it official. Silas retained 80% of Holloway logistics. Lydia received a meager alimony and the family cottage in Maine. "You look like you're glowing, Silas," a voice purred beside him. It was Serena Heavy, his lead attorney. She was wearing a crimson dress that screamed danger, her hand resting a little too intimately on his forearm for a professional setting. But then, they hadn't been strictly professional for over a year. "I feel glowing, Serena," Silas replied, taking a sip of the vintage Dom Perignon. "Look at her." He gestured with his glass toward the corner of the room. Lydia was standing near a pillar, looking painfully out of place amidst the glitz of the victory gala. Silas had insisted she come. "It's for the optics, darling," he had told her. "Show the press we're parting amicably, don't make a scene." She looked small, defeated. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore no jewelry. The Holloway diamonds, after all, were now part of the assets Silas controlled. "She looks pathetic," Serena whispered, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "I almost feel bad for destroying her cross-examination." "Don't be," Silas scoffed. "Lydia was never meant for this world. She's a lamb who thought she could live in a den of wolves. I just did her a favor by putting her out to pasture." A photographer from the City Chronicle flashed a bulb in their faces. Silas flashed his winning smile, the one that had charmed investors and fooled Arthur Holloway for a decade. "Mr. Vance! Mr. Vance!" the reporter called out. "Now that the legal battle is over, what's the first move for Holloway Logistics?" "Expansion," Silas said smoothly, stepping toward the camera. "We're modernizing. The old ways, Arthur's ways, were noble, but outdated. It's time for aggressive growth, and I am the man to lead it." He felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the pinnacle. He had married the daughter, waited out the father, and seized the crown. He was untouchable. Across the room, Lydia made eye contact with him. For a split second, Silas expected to see tears. He expected to see the pleading look of a woman who had lost her home, her legacy, and her husband. But he didn't see tears. Lydia's eyes were dry. They were a flat, cold hazel. She raised her hand, not to wave, but to check her watch. "Is she waiting for a taxi?" Serena laughed, sipping her drink. "Let her wait," Silas said, turning his back on his ex-wife. "Tonight is about us. Tonight is about the future." He didn't notice that the music had stopped. He didn't notice that the chatter in the room, the buzz of New York's elite congratulating the victor, had suddenly died down, replaced by a confused, murmuring silence. "Silas," Serena said, her voice losing its sultry edge. "Silas, turn around." "What is it? Did the cake arrive?" Silas turned. A grin plastered on his face, ready to accept another round of applause. The grin died instantly. The double doors at the entrance of the ballroom, usually manned by security, were wide open. Two large men in dark suits stood on either side, their hands clasped in front of them. They weren't hotel security, they looked like private military. And walking between them, leaning heavily on an ebony cane but moving with a terrifying rhythmic purpose, was a man who was supposed to be a vegetable in a Swiss clinic. It was Arthur Holloway. A collective gasp swept through the room like a draft of freezing air. Arthur Holloway was a legend in the city. He was a man who had built skyscrapers and shipping lanes with sheer willpower. But the Arthur Holloway the world knew for the last 2 years was a frail, bedridden invalid, incapable of speaking, let alone crashing a gala in a tuxedo that fit him perfectly. Silas felt the champagne turned to acid in his stomach. His hand shook, sending a few droplets of the expensive wine onto his cuff. "That's impossible," he whispered. "He's in Zurich." "The reports said." "The reports you paid for?" A deep, gravelly voice echoed through the silent ballroom. Arthur didn't use a microphone. He didn't need one. His voice, though aged, carried the weight of a sledgehammer. He stopped 10 feet away from Silas, his blue eyes sharp and clear, devoid of the fog of illness Silas had banked on. Lydia stepped away from the pillar. She walked toward her father, her head held high, the pathetic demeanor vanishing like smoke. She took her place beside the old man, placing a hand on his shoulder, not to support him, but to stand with him. "Arthur," Silas stammered, his charm failing him for the first time in years. "My God, it's a miracle. We didn't know you were recovering. Lydia didn't say a word." "Lydia didn't say a word because I told her not to," Arthur said. He tapped his cane on the marble floor. Clack, clack. "And it's not a miracle, Silas. It's patience. Something you never had." Serena stepped forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Mr. Holloway, this is a private event. Silas has lawful control over the Holloway estate, as per the court ruling issued this afternoon. If you are here to cause a disturbance—" Arthur laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A court ruling based on the premise that I was mentally incapacitated and that my daughter was unfit. Is that correct?" "The medical documents were clear," Serena stated, though her voice wavered as Arthur's gaze drilled into her. "Dr. Aris Thorne," Arthur said, naming the specialist in Zurich. A man with a sudden influx of cash in his Cayman accounts. $500,000, transferred 3 days before my diagnosis was finalized. Silas felt the blood drain from his face. "That's slander. You're confused, Arthur. You've been sick." "I was sick," Arthur admitted. "I had a stroke. That was real. But I recovered 6 months ago." Lydia knew. We decided to keep it quiet. "Why?" Silas demanded, trying to regain control of the narrative. The cameras were still flashing, the reporters sensing a much better story than a corporate merger. "Why hide your recovery, unless you were plotting something?" "Because I needed to see who the rats were," Arthur spat. "I needed to see who would circle the carcass. I wanted to see if you loved my daughter, or if you just loved my checkbook." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. Silas flinched, as if expecting a weapon. But Arthur pulled out a thick, leather-bound envelope. He tossed it onto the table next to the wedding cake. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding into the frosting. "You celebrated too early, boy," Arthur said softly. "You thought you were playing chess against a girl who didn't know the rules. You forgot who taught her the game." Silas looked at the envelope. "What is that?" "The real truth, as the lawyers like to say." Lydia spoke up for the first time. Her voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't the soft whisper of the wife Silas had bullied. It was cold, precise and dangerous. "Open it, Silas. Read it to your guests." Silas didn't move. "Open it!" Arthur roared, the command shaking the glassware on the tables. Silas reached out with trembling fingers. He tore open the seal. Inside wasn't a legal briefing, it was a series of photographs and bank transcripts. The first photo showed Silas. But not at a board meeting. He was in a hotel room in Monaco. With Serena. The second document was a transfer slip. Corporate funds from Holloway Logistics moved into a shell company called Vance Global. The third document was the one that made Silas's knees buckle. It was a birth certificate. "You see," Arthur said, stepping closer, looming over Silas. "You told the court you were a faithful husband. You told the court you had no conflicts of interest. And you definitely told the court that you had no other liabilities." Arthur pointed a gnarled finger at the birth certificate. "Care to explain why you have a 3-year-old son in Brazil, Silas? A son registered under your name, with monthly support payments coming directly out of my company's charity fund?" The room exploded into chaos. The reporters were shouting questions. Serena looked at Silas with horror. Not because of the embezzlement, but because she evidently didn't know about the child either. "I didn't." Silas choked. "That's fake. It's a forgery." "It's certified," Lydia said, stepping forward. "I visited them, Silas. I met her. I met the boy. He has your eyes. And your chin. And unlike you, he's innocent." "You went to Brazil?" Silas whispered. "I've been a lot of places while you were busy buying judges," Lydia replied. "I was building the case you never saw coming." Silas looked around. The admiration in the room had evaporated. The investors were looking at their phones, likely dumping stock. The judge, Judge Harrison, was nowhere to be seen, likely having slipped out the back the moment Arthur appeared. "This changes nothing," Silas shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "The ruling is signed. Double jeopardy. Res judicata. You can't retry this." "We're not retrying the divorce," Arthur said calmly. "We're here for the arrest." "Arrest?" Silas laughed nervously. "For what? Adultery isn't a crime." "No," Arthur smiled, a predator showing its teeth. "But fraud is. Embezzlement is. And conspiring to falsify medical records across international borders? That's a federal offense. The FBI is waiting in the lobby, Silas. I asked them to give me 5 minutes to say hello." Silas dropped the champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, shards of crystal scattering like his future. "Serena!" Silas turned to his lawyer. "Do something!" Serena backed away, her hands raised. "I didn't know about the funds, Silas. I didn't know about the boy. I was just his counsel." "You're in the photos, my dear," Lydia said coolly. "You're an accomplice." Just then, the heavy thud of boots approached the ballroom doors. Uniformed officers, followed by agents in windbreakers marked FBI, moved into the room. Silas looked for an exit. The balcony? The kitchen? "Don't run, Silas," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "You'll only look guilty. Stand tall, like the man you pretended to be." But Silas wasn't listening. Panic, raw and primal, took over. He shoved a waiter aside, knocking a tray of hors d'oeuvre into the air, and sprinted toward the service exit. "He's running!" someone shouted. "Let him go," Arthur said, not moving a muscle. Lydia watched her husband, the man she had loved, the man who had tormented her, scramble like a rat in a trap. "Why let him go?" Lydia asked quietly. "Because," Arthur whispered, watching the agents casually intercept Silas before he even reached the door. "I want to watch them drag him out." But as the handcuffs clicked around Silas's wrists, and the crowd captured every humiliating second on their smartphones, Arthur turned to his daughter. His face didn't hold the look of total victory. It held a shadow of something else. "We got him," Lydia said, exhaling a breath she felt she'd been holding for 2 years. "We got him," Arthur corrected. "But we haven't found the money yet, Lydia. The accounts in the Cayman Islands, they were empty. Lydia froze. What? All of it? Every dime, Arthur said grimly. Silas didn't steal it alone. He has a partner, someone we haven't identified yet, someone who just watched this whole thing happen and is walking away with the family fortune. Lydia looked around the chaotic ballroom, faces blurred. Who? Who else was close enough to Silas to access the codes? Her eyes landed on the one person who hadn't reacted with shock. The one person who was calmly sipping her drink near the back exit, checking her phone with a bored expression. It wasn't Serena. It was Silas's younger sister, Elena Vance. The shy, stuttering librarian who didn't understand business. The one Silas mocked constantly. Elena looked up. She met Lydia's gaze across the room, and then she winked. A simple, chilling wink. Elena turned and slipped out the back door, vanishing into the night, just as the police dragged her brother away. Dad! Lydia grabbed Arthur's arm. The money isn't gone. It's been moved. And I think I know who has it. The war wasn't over. The battlefield had just shifted. The chaos of the Plaza Hotel felt like a distant nightmare as the heavy, bulletproof glass doors of the Holloway penthouse balcony slid shut, muting the sirens that wailed 20 stories below. The city was alive with the scandal. Every news ticker in Times Square was likely scrolling Silas Vance's name in bright red LEDs. But inside the penthouse, the silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock that had belonged to Arthur's father. Lydia sat on the edge of the velvet sofa, her hands trembling slightly as she held a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. The adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation was fading, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Arthur Holloway sat opposite her, his cane resting against his knee. He looked older now than he had in the ballroom. The performance of the, quote, lion returning to his pride had taken a toll on his recovering body. He rubbed his temples, his eyes closed. We missed it, Arthur murmured, his voice rough. I spent 2 years watching Silas. I watched his bank accounts. I watched his travel logs. I watched him sleep with his lawyer. I documented every single breath that man took. And I missed the person standing right in his shadow. Elena. Lydia whispered the name. It felt foreign on her tongue. To Lydia, Elena Vance had always been a piece of background furniture. She was Silas's spinster sister, a woman who wore oversized cardigans and thick glasses, who worked in the basement archives of the New York Public Library and stuttered when she ordered coffee. Silas treated her with a mix of pity and contempt, often making her wait in the car while he attended high-profile dinners. Lydia had always felt sorry for her. She had even defended Elena when Silas was particularly cruel. She's harmless, Silas. Be nice to her. How naive those words sounded now. I called the bank in the Caymans immediately after the police took Silas, Arthur said, opening his eyes. The transfer protocols were overridden 3 hours ago. Right when the gala started, while Silas was giving his speech, someone was emptying the vaults. But Silas had the biometric keys, Lydia argued. He was the only one with the retinal scan authorization. Silas thought he had the keys. A new voice entered the room. Lydia turned to see a man entering from the hallway. It was Kalen, the private investigator Arthur had hired during his time in Zurich. Kalen was a man who existed in the gray areas of the law, formerly British intelligence, currently a ghost for hire. He was carrying a laptop and looked grim. Kalen, Arthur nodded. Tell us. Kalen set the laptop on the coffee table and spun it around so they could see the screen. It showed security footage from the Holloway Logistics server room, a restricted area in the basement of the headquarters. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. I scrubbed the logs again, Kalen said. I found a looped feed. For the last month, the security cameras in the server room have been playing a pre-recorded loop of an empty hallway. But once I broke the encryption on the loop, I found the real footage. He pressed play. On the screen, a figure entered the server room. It wasn't Silas. It was a woman wearing a maintenance uniform, her face obscured by a cap. But she moved with a fluid, athletic grace that was unmistakable. She approached the main terminal, a system that required top-tier clearance. The woman didn't hack the door. She used a physical key. "Where did she get a key?" Lydia asked. "Watch," Kaylin commanded. On screen, the woman sat at the console. She pulled a device from her pocket, a tablet with wires running out of it. She hooked it into the mainframe. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. There was no hesitation, no stuttering. She turned her head slightly to check a monitor, and the camera caught her profile. It was Elena. But it wasn't the Elena Lydia knew. The thick glasses were gone. Her jaw was set, her expression one of intense, predatory focus. She looked like a surgeon cutting into a patient. "She wasn't just a librarian," Kaylin said, tapping a key to pause the video on Elena's face. "I ran a deeper background check. The Elena Vance, who works at the library. That's real. But it's a cover. I dug into her education records, not the one Silas knows about." Kaylin pulled up a document. "She didn't just go to community college like she claims. She holds a dual PhD in cryptography and actuarial science from MIT, under the alias Evie Hollister. She's published papers on algorithmic theft and blockchain laundering. She's a genius, Arthur. A certified genius who has been playing the role of the dumb sister for 20 years. Lydia felt the room spin. Why? Why pretend to be nothing? "Because nobody watches the nobody," Arthur said bitterly. Silas was the peacock. He wanted the fame, the credit, the applause. Elena let him have it. She let him take the risk. She let him embezzle the money, commit the fraud, and set himself up as the target. She knew eventually he would get caught. She was counting on it. She used him as a mule, Lydia realized, the cruelty of it taking her breath away. Silas did all the work. He stole the money from us, and she stole it from him. And now she has $500 million of liquid assets, Kaylin finished. And she's gone. Where? Arthur demanded. She can't just vanish with that amount of capital. She can if she planned it for a decade, Kaylin said. I tracked her phone. She left it in a trash can outside the plaza. I tracked her credit cards. She hasn't used them in 2 years. She's been using burner accounts. But I found one thread. Kaylin brought up a grainy image from a traffic camera near JFK Airport, taken 40 minutes ago. It showed a black sedan. In the passenger seat was a woman with short blonde hair, a wig, likely, and sunglasses. She's heading out, Kaylin said, but not on a commercial flight. There's a private charter registered to a shell company called Nemesis Holdings. It's scheduled to take off in 20 minutes. Destination, unknown. The flight plan is sealed. Stop that plane, Arthur barked, reaching for his phone to call his contacts at the FAA. We can't, Kaylin shook his head. It's diplomatic. The plane is registered to a consulate. Which consulate? Lydia asked. That's the thing. Kaylin looked at her with concern. It's not a country. It's a sovereign corporate entity operating out of international waters. It's beyond U.S. jurisdiction. Lydia stood up. She walked to the window. The reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked tired, yes, but also a woman who was done being a victim. She's not just running, Dad, Lydia said softly. She's taunting us. That wink at the party she wanted me to know. She wanted me to know she beat us. She hasn't beaten us yet, Arthur growled. Silas knows something. He has to. He lived with her. He grew up with her. He must know where she would go. Silas is in federal custody, Kaylin pointed out. He's likely being processed at the Metropolitan Detention Center right now. He won't talk. His lawyer, Serena, has probably already advised him to shut up. Serena is in custody too, Lydia reminded them. Silas is alone. Lydia turned back to the men. I'm going to see him. Lydia, no, Arthur protested. He's dangerous. He's desperate. You don't need to be near him. I'm the only one he might talk to, Lydia said. He hates you, Dad. He thinks you ruined him. But me? He thinks I'm weak. He thinks he can still manipulate me. I need to let him believe that. He'll try to use you, Kaelin warned. I know, Lydia said, grabbing her coat. But he doesn't know about Elena yet, does he? He thinks Serena betrayed him, or that you simply outsmarted him. He doesn't know his own sister is the one who slit his throat. Arthur looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the steel that had been forged in the fire of the last 2 years. Go, Arthur said, but take Kaelin. Wait outside the interrogation room, Kaelin. If Silas so much as lunges at her. He won't, Lydia said, her voice turning icy. Because I'm going to break his heart before he gets the chance. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn was a stark contrast to the gold-leafed luxury of the plaza. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. The fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing frequency. Lydia sat in the visitation room. It was a small, gray box with a steel table bolted to the floor. There was no glass partition for this meeting. Arthur had pulled strings to get her a legal consultation room, usually reserved for attorneys. It offered privacy, but it also offered proximity. The door buzzed, and a heavy lock clanked open. Silas Vance walked in. He looked unrecognizable. In just 6 hours, the titan of industry had been reduced to a prisoner. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was too loose in the shoulders. His hair, usually gelled to perfection, hung limp over his forehead. His hands were cuffed in front of him, and his ankles were shackled. A guard guided him to the chair opposite Lydia and shackled his cuffs to the table ring. 15 minutes, the guard grunted, stepping out and closing the heavy door. Silas stared at the table for a long moment before looking up at Lydia. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with dark circles. When he saw her, a sneer curled his lip. A reflex, a muscle memory of dominance. Came to gloat? Silas rasped. Or did you come to ask for a settlement? Because I'm telling you now, Lydia, this isn't over. My lawyers will have this thrown out by morning. Entrapment. Illegal surveillance. Your father is going to rot for this. Lydia didn't blink. She placed her hands on the table, folded calmly. There are no lawyers, Silas, she said quietly. Serena was arrested as an accessory to fraud. Her firm dropped her an hour ago. And they dropped you too. Your assets are frozen. You have no counsel unless you want a public defender. Silas flinched. The reality of his isolation was setting in. I have money offshore. I can buy the best defense team in the country. No, Lydia said. You don't. Silas laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You think you know everything. You think because Arthur woke up from his nap, he knows where I buried the bones? The Cayman accounts are untouchable. The Cayman accounts are empty, Silas. The laughter stopped abruptly. Silas leaned forward, the chains rattling. What did you say? Empty, Lydia repeated. Zero balance. The funds were transferred out at 8:15 p.m. tonight, just as you were making your toast. Silas's face went pale. That's a lie. Only I have the codes. Me and... He stopped. His eyes darted back and forth. Serena? Did Serena flip? Serena didn't have the codes, did she? Lydia pressed. You never trusted her that much. You only trusted family. Silas stared at her. What are you getting at? Who else had access to the server room, Silas? Who else knew the encryption keys? Who helped you set up the shell companies? Because you were too busy playing CEO to understand the math? Silas shook his head. No one. I did it. Me. Stop lying, Lydia snapped, her voice sharp. We know about Elena. Silas froze. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him looking like a wax figure. Elena? My sister? What does she have to do with this? She has the money, Silas. That's insane, Silas stammered. Elena, she's an idiot. She's a librarian. She can barely work a smartphone. I have to pay her rent. Lydia reached into her bag and pulled out the photo Kaelin had printed, the image from the server room. The woman with the intense eyes, the high-tech equipment, the cold precision. She slid it across the metal table. "Look at her, Silas! Really? Look at her!" Silas looked down. He stared at the photo for a long time. His breathing became shallow. "She's been playing you," Lydia said, twisting the knife. "She has a dual Ph.D. from MIT. She's an expert in algorithmic theft. She set up the structure of your embezzlement not to help you, but to trap you. She waited until the divorce was final, until the money was consolidated, and until you were publicly destroyed. And then she took it all." "No," Silas whispered. "No, no, no. She worshipped me. I took care of her." "You bullied her," Lydia corrected. "I saw it. For years. You mocked her. You treated her like a servant. Did you really think she didn't hate you?" Silas squeezed his eyes shut. Memories seemed to crash into him. "She told me to use the Cayman Bank." Silas mumbled, his voice trembling. "I wanted to use the Swiss accounts. She said Caymans were safer. She said the encryption was better." "Because she had the back door to the Cayman system," Lydia said. "And the medical records." Silas looked up, horror dawning on him. "She found Dr. Thorne. She set up the payments. She said she would handle the dirty work, so my hands stayed clean." "She made sure your paper trail was miles wide," Lydia said. "She handed you to us on a silver platter, Silas. You're going to prison for 20 years, and she's going to live on a private island with your fortune." Silas let out a low, guttural sound, half scream, half sob. He slammed his shackled fists onto the table. "I'll kill her! I'll kill her!" The door opened instantly. 2 guards stepped in, batons ready. "Sit down!" the guard yelled. Silas collapsed back into the chair, hyperventilating. He looked at Lydia, and for the first time she saw no arrogance. Only a broken, pathetic man. "Help me," he begged. "Lydia, please. You can't let her get away with it. It's your father's money, too." "I intend to get it back," Lydia said calmly. "But I need to know where she's going." "You know her habits. You know her safe places. Where would she go?" Silas wiped his nose on his sleeve. He was thinking, his mind racing through decades of memories he had previously discarded as irrelevant. "She used to talk about a place," Silas said, "when we were kids, before our parents died. She was obsessed with this old storybook, The Count of Monte Cristo. She loved the part about the island." "Silas, focus. Real places." "She has a property," Silas said fast. "I found a deed once, years ago, in her apartment. I thought it was fake. A game. It was for a vineyard. In Mendoza, Argentina." "Mendoza?" "She speaks Spanish," Silas said. "She pretends she doesn't. But I heard her on the phone once, speaking perfect Spanish. I ignored it. I ignored everything." He looked at Lydia with desperate intensity. "But there's something else. The money. She can't access all of it yet." Lydia leaned in. "Why not?" "Because of the Titan protocol," Silas said. "It was the one thing I insisted on. A failsafe. To move more than 50% of the funds, you need 2 keys. A digital key and a voice print." "A voice print?" "Mine," Silas said. "She needs my voice saying a specific phrase to unlock the final tier. If she transferred the money out of the Caymans, it's sitting in a holding limbo. She can't spend it. Not until she gets the authorization." "She doesn't have your voice," Lydia said. "She has recordings," Silas panicked. "She has hours of me talking, interviews, voicemail." "It has to be live," Silas said. "The system detects deepfakes. It measures vocal cord vibration. It has to be me, Lydia. Live, on the phone." Lydia sat back. This was the leverage. "If she needs your voice," Lydia said slowly, "then she's going to call you." "She can't call me here," Silas said. "I'm in isolation." "She knows that," Lydia realized, "which means she's going to try to break you out. Or—" She looked at Silas. Or she's going to try to kill you to bypass the biometric failsafe. Does the system revert to a secondary user if the primary user is confirmed dead? Silas's eyes went wide. He swallowed hard. Yes, if I die, the authorization falls to the next of kin. And who is your next of kin, Silas? Elena, he whispered. The realization hung in the air like poison gas. Elena didn't just steal the money. She needed Silas dead to access it fully. And Silas was currently sitting in a federal prison, a sitting duck. You're not safe here, Lydia said, standing up. Get me out, Silas pleaded. Lydia, I'll give you everything. I'll sign confessions. I'll testify. Just don't let her kill me. You don't know her. You don't know what she's capable of. I'm starting to get an idea, Lydia said. She turned to the door. Lydia! Silas screamed as she walked away. Lydia! Lydia signaled the guard to let her out. As the heavy steel door slammed shut, muting Silas's screams, Kalen stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway. Did you get it? Kalen asked. Argentina, Lydia said, and she needs him dead. We have a problem, Kalen. Elena isn't fleeing, she's hunting. Kalen checked his phone. His face tightened. You're right, he said. I just got an alert. A lawyer just filed paperwork to represent Silas Vance. A new lawyer. Who? Someone who doesn't exist, Kalen said. But they just requested a transfer for Silas to a medical facility due to a heart condition that just appeared in his file 5 minutes ago. She's hacking the prison system, Lydia realized. She's going to move him, and then she's going to kill him. Lydia looked down the long, concrete corridor. The game had changed. It wasn't about money anymore. It was a race to keep the man she hated alive, just long enough to destroy the woman who had fooled them all. Call my father, Lydia commanded, walking fast toward the exit. Tell him to fuel the jet. We're not going to Argentina yet. We're going to intercept a prison transport. That's a felony, Kalen said, falling into step beside her. Add it to the list, Lydia said. Tonight, we're not the Holloways. We're the ones who knock back. The rain had started falling over New York City, a cold, relentless sheet that turned the asphalt of the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway into a slick mirror of neon lights and brake lights. Inside the armored Range Rover, the silence was suffocating. Kalen drove with a calm, terrifying precision, weaving through the late-night traffic. Lydia sat in the passenger seat, gripping the dashboard. In her lap lay a burner phone, connected to a secure channel with her father back at the penthouse. He's moving, Arthur's voice crackled over the speaker. The transport ambulance just left the detention center. Designated Unit 404. But, Lydia, the dispatch logs are wrong. They have him marked as a critical cardiac transfer to Mount Sinai. But they're taking the on-ramp for the Verrazano Bridge. They're taking him to a kill site, Kalen said, his eyes scanning the mirrors. The bridge is a choke point. Or they'll dump him in the water and call it a failed escape attempt. How far ahead are they? Lydia asked. 2 miles, Kalen replied. He shifted gears, the engine roaring as he accelerated. Hold on. Ahead of them, the traffic flow seemed to be manipulated. Green lights turned red instantly as they approached, while the ambulance far ahead seemed to hit a miraculous wave of green. She's controlling the grid, Lydia realized. Elena is watching the traffic cameras. She's clearing a path for them and blocking us. She can control the lights, Kalen muttered, swerving onto the shoulder to bypass a confused line of cars. But you can't control physics? Kalen floored the accelerator. The heavy SUV surged forward, scraping against the concrete barrier. Sparks flew, but they gained ground. Within minutes, the flashing lights of the ambulance came into view. It wasn't a standard FDNY vehicle. It was a private medical transport, unmarked and ominous. Inside the ambulance, Silas Vance was groggy. The medic in the back, a man with a scar running through his eyebrow, had injected him with something that made his limbs feel like lead. Silas lay strapped to the gurney, his heart pounding against his ribs. Where are we going? Silas slurred. My chest doesn't hurt. Relax, Mr. Vance. the medic said, checking a syringe. "It'll be over soon. Complications from stress. Tragic. The autopsy will be inconclusive." Silas tried to scream, but his tongue felt swollen. He looked at the medic's phone sitting on the shelf. It buzzed with a text message. "Package secured. Dispose at coordinates." Suddenly, the world turned upside down. A massive impact slammed into the rear of the ambulance. The vehicle fishtailed violently, screeching across 3 lanes. The medic was thrown against the cabinetry, the syringe flying from his hand. "What the hell?" the driver shouted. Outside, Kalen had rammed the ambulance's bumper with the reinforced grille of the Range Rover. "Ram them again," Lydia ordered. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold necessity. If Silas died, the money died. And if the money died, Elena won. Kalen spun the wheel, clipping the ambulance's rear tire. The transport vehicle spun out of control, crashing through a construction barrier and skidding to a halt in a muddy embankment off the highway exit. Kalen slammed the brakes. "Stay here," he told Lydia. He jumped out into the rain, drawing a suppressed pistol. But Lydia didn't stay. She grabbed the tire iron from under her seat and followed him. The back doors of the ambulance kicked open. The medic stumbled out, dazed, reaching for a weapon in his belt. Kalen didn't hesitate. 2 shots, one to the shoulder, one to the leg. The man collapsed, groaning in the mud. The driver kicked his door open and fired blindly into the dark. Kalen took cover behind the ambulance door. "Silas!" Lydia screamed, running toward the open back doors, ignoring the gunfire. "Lydia, get down!" Kalen shouted. Lydia reached the gurney. Silas was thrashing, his eyes wide with terror. He saw Lydia, his ex-wife, the woman he had discarded, looming over him with a tire iron. For a second, he thought she was there to finish the job. "Please," he whimpered. Lydia smashed the lock on the gurney straps. "Get up, you idiot! We have to move!" "They tried to poison me," Silas gagged, stumbling out of the ambulance, falling into the mud. The driver came around the side of the vehicle, aiming his gun at Lydia's back. Crack! The driver dropped. Arthur Holloway had sent backup, a sniper positioned on the overpass above. Or maybe Kalen was just that fast. It didn't matter. The threats were neutralized. Lydia grabbed Silas by the collar of his orange jumpsuit and dragged him toward the Range Rover. He was weeping, a mix of drugs and sheer panic. "Get in!" She shoved him into the back seat. Kalen jumped in the driver's seat, breathing hard. "Police scanners are lighting up. We have 3 minutes before the real cops get here, and 5 minutes before Elena realizes her hit squad failed." "Where do we go?" Silas sobbed, clutching his chest. "She'll find me. She sees everything." Lydia turned in her seat to look at him. She looked feral, her hair plastered to her face by the rain, mud on her expensive coat. "We're going to the one place she can't hack," Lydia said. "The sky." "My father is waiting at Teterboro," she continued, looking at Kalen. "The jet is fueled. We're leaving the country." "To where?" Silas asked. "Mendoza," Lydia said. "We're going to pay your sister a visit." Silas shook his head violently. "No, that's her fortress. You're walking into the lion's den." "Exactly," Lydia said, her eyes hard. "Because that's the only place the lioness will be waiting to protect her cubs. And by cubs, I mean my family's $500 million. As the Range Rover peeled away, leaving the burning wreckage of the ambulance behind, Lydia pulled out her phone. She had a missed call. The number was blocked. She answered it. "Hello, Lydia," a voice said. It was soft, melodic, and terrifyingly calm. It was Elena. "You're persistent," Elena said. "I expected the ambulance crash. A bit cliché, but effective." "We have him, Elena," Lydia said. "You can't unlock the money without him." "I know," Elena sighed, "which is why I'm inviting you over. Come to Mendoza, Lydia. Bring my brother. Let's have a family reunion." "But Lydia?" "What?" "Don't bring the police," Elena warned. "Or I release the other files." The ones about your father's shipping lanes in the 90s. The ones about the real origin of the Holloway fortune. If I go down, I take the whole legacy with me." The line went dead. Lydia stared at the phone. "What did she say?" Silas asked. "She said welcome to the game." Lydia lied. She looked out the window at the passing city lights. She wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting to keep the past buried. The flight to Argentina was 11 hours of suffocating tension. Silas Vance sat huddled in a blanket, shivering as the drugs from the ambush left his system. He looked small, terrified, and desperate. "She remembers everything," Silas whispered to Kalen, who cleaned his weapon across the aisle. "She's been planning this since we were children." "She isn't just a librarian, Lydia. She's a genius." Lydia ignored him, studying the schematics of the Mendoza property. On the surface, it was a high-end winery. Underground, the thermal scans revealed a massive server farm. That was the vault. The jet touched down on a private airstrip as the sun set over the Andes, casting long, jagged shadows over the endless rows of grapevines. A black SUV waited for them, driving them silently to the gates of Casa de la Sombra, House of the Shadow. Elena was waiting on the front steps of the sprawling modern hacienda. She looked nothing like the stuttering Sister Silas had mocked for years. She wore a pristine white silk suit, holding a glass of Malbec, looking every bit the queen of her domain. "Welcome," Elena called out, her voice smooth and confident. "You look exhausted. Come inside. We have business to discuss." The interior was cold and minimalist. Elena led them to a long, obsidian dining table. She didn't offer them food, she offered them an ultimatum. "The Titan Protocol," Elena said, cutting to the chase. "I have 49% of the funds laundered. To get the rest, I need the biometric voice authorization. I need Silas." "Why would we let him help you?" Lydia asked. Elena pressed a button on a remote. A screen descended from the ceiling, showing a live feed of a hospital room in Zurich. Arthur Holloway lay sleeping, but a man stood in the corner, watching the monitors. "My associate is waiting for a signal," Elena said coolly. "If I don't get the code in 1 hour, the life support machines will suffer a tragic electrical surge." Lydia slammed her hands on the table. "You wouldn't." "I would," Elena replied. "You threatened my freedom. I threaten your heart." Silas looked at Lydia, tears streaming down his face. "She'll do it, Lydia. She's crazy." Lydia looked at the screen, then at her father. She had no choice. "Okay, we do it." They descended into the earth. The basement was a fortress of humming servers and cooling fans. In the center stood a terminal with a microphone. "Say it, Silas," Elena commanded, drawing a pistol and aiming it at Lydia. Silas stepped up to the mic, his voice trembling. "The authorization phrase is, 'The king eats first.'" "Access granted." The computer chimed. The transfer bar began to load. 50%, 70%. "There," Elena smiled. "Was that so hard?" "Now call off the man in the hospital," Lydia demanded. "Of course," Elena said, pulling out her phone. Suddenly, the room flashed red. A siren wailed. "Warning! Unauthorized external breach detected." Elena's eyes went wide. "What?" "The money. It's not going to my account. It's vanishing." "We built this infrastructure, Elena," Lydia said, her voice cutting through the alarm. "We didn't come here to stop the transfer. We came to trace your login." On the screen above, the assassin in the hospital room was suddenly tackled by Arthur's head of security. The trap had sprung. "I knew you'd go for him," Lydia said. "And now that you're logged in, we found every other account you own." Elena's face twisted in rage. She raised the gun at Lydia. "I'll kill you all!" Click. The lights cut out completely. In the pitch black, Kalen moved. The final battle had begun. The darkness of the subterranean server room was shattered by the deafening crack of a gunshot. Kalen moved by instinct, vaulting over the obsidian table and tackling Elena to the concrete floor just as she fired a second round. The bullet sparked off a server rack, showering the cowering Silas with hot metal fragments. "The drive!" Elena shrieked, fighting Kaelin like a wild animal. "Don't let the purge finish. Pull the physical drive." She was staring desperately at the main console. A blue light pulsed on a protruding hard drive, the last physical backup. If she pulled it, she could save the data before the transfer was complete. Lydia didn't hesitate. The fear that had once paralyzed her was gone, replaced by cold clarity. She grabbed a heavy steel fire extinguisher from the wall. She wasn't a soldier, but today she was the executioner of their greed. She swung the cylinder with all her strength, not at Elena, but directly into the terminal. Crash! The console shattered. The physical drive snapped in half, sparking violently before the blue light died. The hum of the servers wound down to a mechanical groan. The progress bar vanished. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by Silas's sobbing. Kaelin held Elena pinned to the floor. "It's gone," Lydia said, dropping the extinguisher. "All of it. The Cayman accounts, the crypto, the bonds, dust." Elena went limp, her forehead resting on the cold floor. When she looked up, her face was twisted in pure hatred. "You idiot. You didn't just bankrupt me. That was the Holloway fortune. You burned your own inheritance to spite me." Lydia walked closer, looking down at the woman who had played them all for fools. "You still don't get it," Lydia said, a cold smile touching her lips. "I didn't burn it. The kill switch didn't delete the funds. It repatriated them." Elena's eyes widened. "What?" The moment the purge started, the system transferred the assets to a holding account controlled by the Department of Justice. Lydia revealed. "I didn't give the money to you, and I didn't keep it for myself. I gave it to the law. It's evidence, Elena, proof of the massive fraud you and Silas committed. It guarantees you both go away for a very long time." Silas scrambled up from the corner, his orange jumpsuit stained with grease. "Lydia, I can testify. I can say she forced me. Just don't let the police take me." "You were a hostage to your own greed, Silas," Lydia said calmly. She gestured to the wreckage of the server room. "Here is your kingdom. Rule it." Sirens began to wail outside. The Argentine Federal Police had arrived. "Let her up," Lydia commanded. Kaelin released Elena. She slumped against the rack, defeated. Her accounts were frozen, her passport flagged. There was nowhere to run. Lydia turned to the exit. "Wait!" Silas screamed, running after her. "You can't leave me here with her. She'll kill me." Lydia paused at the heavy steel door. She looked back at the two siblings, traitors who had destroyed each other for a fortune they would never spend. "She won't kill you, Silas," Lydia said. "She needs someone to blame, and you need someone to hate. You two deserve each other." Lydia closed the door, sealing them in the darkness. The new dawn. 3 months later, the boardroom of Holloway Logistics was bathed in the crisp morning light of the Manhattan skyline. Lydia sat at the head of the table, reviewing the quarterly projections. Gone was the timid wife in the gray dress. In her place sat a CEO in a tailored navy suit. The door opened, and Arthur Holloway walked in, looking stronger than he had in years. "The plea deals are signed," Arthur announced, taking a seat. "Silas pleaded guilty to 40 counts of wire fraud. He's looking at 15 years. "And Elena?" Lydia asked. Arthur chuckled darkly. She turned on him immediately. She represented herself, surrendered the encryption keys, and got her sentence reduced to 10 years. They tore each other apart. Lydia looked out the window at the city. She thought about the night at the plaza, the moment she thought her life was over. She realized now it had only been the beginning. "They're the past, Dad," Lydia said, turning back to her team with a confident smile. "We have a company to build. Let's get to work." Lydia Vance was no longer a victim. She was a Holloway, and she had earned every inch of the view. Lydia's journey from a discarded wife to a powerhouse CEO proves that the best revenge isn't just surviving, it's thriving. Silas and Elena thought they were playing a game of chess against a pawn, but they failed to realize that a pawn can become a queen if it keeps moving forward. The betrayal destroyed their family, but it forged Lydia's future. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and the ultimate comeback, please hit the like button to support the channel. Do you think Silas deserved a harsher sentence? Or was he just a puppet in Elena's game? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Share this video with a friend who loves a good twist.